There is a moment in the Hunger Games, Catching Fire, where President Snow lifts a glass of wine to his lips, and blood swirls into the liquid before he drinks it. It looks like a small, grotesque flourish added for shock value. It is not. That detail is hiding something the movie never explains, something that connects directly to a secret buried inside a pocket watch, a whipping post, and a games that took place 25 years before Katniss Everdeen ever picked up a bow. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what all three of those things have in common and why the answer changes how you understand everything Haymitch Abernathy has ever done. But we are going to earn that answer the way the story earns it. Slowly, piece by piece, the same way the rebellion itself was built. Before we go further, if you have ever finished a Hunger Games book and then watched the film adaptation with a nagging sense that something was missing, something felt rearranged, this channel exists for exactly that feeling. Froncio. Hit subscribe now, drop a like, and tell me in the comments which difference surprised you most, because we are about to go through dozens of them, and some are far stranger than you remember. Catching Fire began as a novel that, according to author Suzanne Collins herself, does not even reach the arena until roughly 2/3 of the way through the book. Terwant. The film, sold heavily on its action, brings the games into play much earlier than the source material does. That single structural choice explains almost every other change on this list, because when a studio compresses a slow-burning political thriller into a 2.5-hour blockbuster, characters get cut, subplots get erased, and entire mysteries get quietly deleted from the frame. Take Madge Undersea. In the book, she is the mayor's daughter, a quiet, wealthy girl who becomes one of Katniss's closest confidants. And it is Madge who supplies the medicine that treats Gale after his brutal public whipping, right? In the film, Madge does not exist at all. Her absence is not a small edit, and worse, it removes an entire thread about class division inside District 12. The idea that even the district's privileged citizens are complicit in and endangered by the capital's cruelty. The filmmakers folded her narrative function into other characters and simply let her vanish. A fate several book characters share. Dirtfa. Two of them are Darius and Pernia, a pair of peacekeepers who, in the novel, actually attempt to stop Gale's whipping. Or Darius is beaten for interfering. In the movie, neither character appears, and the intervention falls entirely to Katniss, Peeta, and Haymitch. The reason is almost certainly practical. Every named peacekeeper the audience meets and grows to like is a peacekeeper the story eventually has to kill or corrupt, and the film simply did not have the runtime to develop them. Then there is a deletion that was made for a very specific storytelling reason, and it is the first thread we are pulling toward that final reveal. Midway through the book, Katniss encounters two escaped fugitives from District 8 named Bonnie and Twill, hiding in the woods. They tell her they are fleeing toward a place called District 13, This is the first confirmation in the entire series that District 13 might still exist, decades after the capital supposedly destroyed it. The director cut both characters entirely, and the reason is almost elegant in its simplicity. Keeping District 13 a total mystery until the film's closing minutes hits far harder on screen than it does on the page, where readers already have pages of hints to chew on. What feels like an omission is actually the filmmakers protecting a secret the book gives away too early. Even the relationships shift in ways that quietly change who Katniss is. In the novel, she hunts alone at the story's opening, and Gale only joins her on Sundays because of his mining schedule. She hunts partly to help feed his family, an act of quiet loyalty rather than romance. The film skips straight to them, hunting together from the very first scene, collapsing months of solitary routine into a single image of partnership. And where the book keeps Gale's declaration of love as something only remembered, something Katniss turns over in her mind after the fact, the film stages an actual kiss immediately after that hunting trip and rewrites his words entirely. turning "I love you" into a far more uncertain question. Does she love him, Faye? It is a small linguistic shift, but it changes Gale from a man stating a fact to a man begging for reassurance, which tells you something about how differently the two mediums wanted you to feel about this triangle. Some editions go the opposite direction. Inventing emotion, the book withholds. Effie Trinket's tearful farewell to Katniss and Peeta before they enter the arena exists only in the film. In Collins's original text, the two tributes never get that goodbye at all, which is arguably crueler. Quenk, the novel, is comfortable letting relationships end abruptly and without closure, because that is what the Capitol actually does to people. Condron. The film, aiming for maximum emotional catharsis before its centerpiece action sequence, chose to give the audience the goodbye the book refuses. Inside the arena itself, the discrepancies multiply, and some of them, fundamentally, alter character abilities. Peeta, in the film, fights and even kills a tribute underwater, almost as soon as the games begin, for Mouse. In the book, Peeta cannot swim at all, and survives the initial bloodbath only because Finnick Odair physically drags him off the platform. Fundrain. That is not a minor detail. It reshapes the power dynamic of their early alliance, transforming Peeta from someone capable of violence into someone entirely dependent on a stranger's mercy, which is arguably a more honest representation of who Peeta has always been. Or 7. The fake pregnancy plotline suffers a similar fate. In the novel, Finnick and Peeta keep leaning on the pregnancy lie, constantly once inside the arena, using it again and again to manipulate sponsors into sending gifts. The film introduces the lie during the interviews and then almost entirely abandons it once the games start, as though the screenwriters decided one dramatic reveal was enough mileage to get from a single lie. Even the physical geography of the Capitol's twisted battlefield gets rewritten. When the cornucopia platform begins spinning violently, the film has Katniss thrown directly into the water, triggering visible panic among allies who are in on the plan to protect her. Can't. The book is quieter. She simply loses her balance, and the wisdom that guides her through the games themselves gets reassigned. In the film, it is Finnick who repeats Haymitch's crucial advice to remember who the real enemy is. In the book, Katniss recalls that lesson entirely on her own, without anyone needing to say it aloud. A detail that speaks to how much the novel trusts its narrator's inner voice compared to the film, which needs to externalize thought into dialogue. Which brings us back to Haymitch and to that pocket watch and to the mystery we opened with unexplained. During a Capitol party, the book includes a scene where the enigmatic head game maker, Plutarch Heavensbee, dances with Katniss and shows her his pocket watch. When he presses a hidden mechanism, the watch face reveals a mockingjay, projected in glowing light, a symbol tying him directly to a rebellion Katniss does not yet know exists. It is one of the most important foreshadowing moments in the entire book. The film cuts it completely to Naui. Collins has spoken about how deliberately she plants these kinds of seeds. In one interview discussing the trilogy's construction, she noted that Plutarch himself first appears unnamed as the game maker who falls into a punch bowl earlier in the story. A joke on the surface that becomes a major plot thread. 2 books later, Hondo. She has openly discussed planting details like this throughout the series, sometimes cutting seeds that never fully grow, if they don't ultimately serve the larger story. The pocket watch was one seed the film chose to prune, leaving Plutarch's true loyalties to surface through action alone, rather than through that ticking, glowing clue. And Gale's punishment ties into this same web of political rewriting. Timon. In the book, he is whipped for the crime of being caught with illegally hunted game, a punishment about poaching and survival. In the film, his crime becomes physically striking a peacekeeper, a punishment about violence and rebellion. That change is not cosmetic. Hell, it shifts Gale from a victim of an unjust economic system into an active instigator of resistance, foreshadowing the more militant version of Gale that dominates the story's final chapters. 10. Even Snow himself gets rewritten emotionally. Elefus. The film gives him a granddaughter who idolizes Katniss's fashion sense, a small humanizing detail that does not exist in the books at all, and it visualizes his illness through that blood-in-the-wine-glass image we opened with at Tremouillervent. In Collins's prose, there is no granddaughter, and the horror is more sensory and constant. Katniss simply notices, again and again, the smell of blood on Snow's breath, a quiet, inescapable reminder of the poison and violence that has kept him in power for decades. Mabonbur, readers of the later prequel novel, eventually learn far more about the roots of that condition, but within Catching Fire itself, the book trades visual spectacle for something closer to dread that never leaves the room. L'Enfant. Now remember what I promised at the very beginning. All three of these threads, the wine glass, the watch, and the whipping post, connect to one buried story the film never tells at all. How Haymitch Abernathy actually won his own Hunger Games. The novel dedicates real space to explaining that Haymitch, decades earlier, survived the brutal second quarter quell by using the arena's own force field against his opponents, exploiting a boundary the game makers never expected a tribute to weaponize. It is the single most important piece of backstory, explaining why Haymitch drinks, why he is broken, and why the capital has spent years quietly punishing him for outsmarting them in front of the entire nation. The film never explains any of it. Audiences are simply told he won once, a long time ago, and left to fill in the rest. But now you know, the same institution that engineered a boy's fake pregnancy for ratings, hid rebellion inside a nobleman's watch, and poisoned its own president into a slow, bloody death, is the same institution that could never forgive a broken young man for beating its rules at its own game. It's worth remembering, too, that behind every one of these choices sat real people making real decisions under enormous pressure. Production on Catching Fire began in September 2012 and wrapped the following March, with cast and crew working demanding 14-hour days, 6 days a week, shooting first around Atlanta before moving to Hawaii for the arena sequences. 13. Director Francis Lawrence took over from Gary Ross, working from a screenplay ultimately reshaped by Simon Beaufoy and Michael De Bruyne, since Suzanne Collins, who had co-written the first film, chose not to return as a screenwriter for the sequel, 13. And when it finally reached theaters, the gamble paid off almost unimaginably well. Catching Fire grossed more than $800 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film released in 2013. None of that success erased the franchise's harder moments either, and when the very first film had premiered a year earlier, casting choices that were entirely faithful to Collins's own written descriptions still provoked an ugly public reaction online, with some viewers expressing shock and anger that characters explicitly described in the books as dark-skinned were portrayed by black actors. 14. One widely shared post complained that the casting had somehow ruined the movie, despite Collins having described the character on the page as having dark brown skin and eyes. It was a strange, uncomfortable footnote to a story that has always, at its core, been about how easily people convince themselves that oppression only happens to someone else. For it, every one of these changes, small and enormous, reveals the same underlying tension that defines every book-to-screen adaptation. A story built for the intimate, unhurried interior of a reader's mind, being reshaped for the loud, visual, time-pressured language of cinema. 15. Neither version is more true. 15. They are simply two different machines built to deliver the same warning about power, spectacle, and the people who survive both. So, which cut, added, or rewritten moment hit you hardest? 15. Was it Madge disappearing entirely, or the pocket watch that could have changed how you saw Plutarch from the start? 15. Type it in the comments because I read every one of them. 15. And if this kind of deep, evidence-based comparison is exactly what you come here for, make sure you are subscribed, tap that like button, and share this with the one friend who still insists the movie's got everything right. 15. There is always more hiding beneath the surface than the screen ever shows you. But